When 8-year-old Michael Jackson walked into Steeltown Records on March 23rd, 1968, his small hands were trembling with terror. The tiny recording studio in Gary, Indiana didn't look like much from the outside, squeezed between a hardware store and a laundromat, but inside those soundproof walls, everything his family had sacrificed for was about to be decided in the next 3 hours. What happened that morning would either launch the most extraordinary musical career in history or destroy the dreams of a working-class family who had bet everything on their youngest son's impossible talent. But what Michael Jackson did on his very first professional recording take was so perfect, so technically flawless, that a veteran recording engineer with 15 years of experience would remove his headphones in stunned disbelief and utter words he'd never spoken before about any artist, let alone a child. This is the untold story of how one terrified 8-year-old boy walked into a studio and did something that professional singers spend their entire careers trying to achieve, proving that true greatness isn't learned, it's born. The morning had started with Joe Jackson's stern warning in the family car. If we don't get this recording right, we lose the deal. He wasn't trying to scare his sons, he was preparing them for reality. Gordon Keith, the owner of Steeltown Records, had taken an enormous gamble on the Jackson 5. He'd paid for expensive studio time, hired professional musicians, and arranged distribution deals. But this was their one shot. If the recording wasn't good enough, if the single didn't sell, there would be no second chances in an industry that chewed up and spat out child performers without mercy. Michael sat in the back seat feeling physically sick with anxiety. Everything was riding on his voice, his ability to translate what he did naturally in their garage into something magical in a professional studio environment. "What if I mess up?" he whispered to his mother, his voice barely audible over his brother's nervous chatter. Katherine Jackson, the quiet strength behind her family's musical ambitions, squeezed her youngest son's hand with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "You won't mess up, baby." "But what if I do? What if my voice sounds different in the studio?" Michael's fears were consuming him. "What if I can't do it?" What Michael didn't know was that in less than 3 hours, his first take would be so technically perfect that it would become the master recording, untouched and unedited. He had no idea that he was about to prove something that would define his entire legendary career. That some talents are so natural, so instinctive, that they transcend training, experience, and even age. Steeltown Records wasn't much to look at from the outside. But inside, Gordon Keith had built something special. The studio featured the same professional equipment that Motown used in Detroit: soundproof walls, a sophisticated mixing board, and microphones that could capture every nuance of a performance. Gordon had spent 3 years building this dream, hoping to discover and nurture Gary's incredible musical talent. He'd recorded gospel groups, R&B artists, even a polka band, but he'd never worked with children before. When Joe Jackson had approached him 6 months earlier about recording the Jackson 5, Gordon's first reaction was skepticism. "Kids," Gordon had said, shaking his head. "I don't know, Joe. Kid groups are cute for local shows, but they don't sell real records." Joe's response was immediate and passionate. "These kids are different. Give us one session. If you don't like what you hear, I'll pay for the studio time myself." Something in Joe's determination, combined with the Jackson 5's growing reputation in local clubs, convinced Gordon to take the risk. Now, on this pivotal Saturday morning, the Jackson family arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. Joe Jackson believed punctuality was a sign of professionalism, and his sons had been drilled on studio etiquette for weeks. The boys tumbled out of the family van, wearing matching outfits that Katherine had stayed up until midnight perfecting. Jackie was 14, Tita was 13, Jermaine was 12, Marlon was 10, and Michael, at just 8 years old, looked impossibly small next to his older brothers. The recording engineer, Don Davis, had been setting up equipment since 7 a.m. He'd worked with Gordon on dozens of sessions and knew exactly how to extract professional sound from the studio's modest setup. But when he saw 5 young boys filing into his workspace, he couldn't hide his concern. "They're so young," Don whispered to Gordon, adjusting microphone positions. "Are you sure about this?" Gordon nodded toward Joe Jackson. "Joe says they're good. Let's give them a fair shot." Don had already mentally prepared himself for a long, frustrating day. Recording with inexperienced artists was always challenging, but recording with children was typically a nightmare of missed cues, pitch problems, and emotional breakdowns. When he asked who would be singing lead vocals and saw 8-year-old Michael tentatively raise his hand, Don's heart sank. The boy was barely 4 feet tall, shy-looking, and clearly nervous. "Have you ever recorded in a professional studio before?" Don asked gently. "No, sir," Michael replied, his voice so quiet that Don had to lean closer to hear him. Don sighed internally, already calculating how many takes this would require. "Okay, here's how this worked," he explained patiently. "Recording is completely different from performing live. These microphones pick up everything. Every breath, every tiny mistake, every moment of uncertainty. So we're going to do multiple takes, maybe 10, maybe 20. We keep going until we get it right. Don't get discouraged if the first few attempts don't sound good. That's completely normal for everyone." Michael nodded, but his stomach was churning with terror. Joe placed a heavy hand on his youngest son's shoulder. "You know the song, boy. Just sing it like you've been practicing." But Michael could hear what his father wasn't saying. "You better not mess this up because everything depends on you." The song was called Big Boy, an up-tempo R&B number that Gordon had written specifically for the group. It featured a simple chord progression and catchy hook. Exactly the kind of track that could work on local radio if the performance was exceptional. Don carefully positioned the brothers in a semicircle for backup vocals, but Michael stood alone at the lead microphone, looking lost in the shadow of the professional equipment. "Let's start with a sound check," Don announced. "Michael, just sing a few lines so I can set your recording levels." Michael's first attempt came out as barely a whisper. "You're going to need to sing much louder than that, son. Really project your voice like you're trying to reach the back of a large theater." Michael tried again, forcing his voice louder. Don made adjustments to the mixing board. "That's better. When we record for real, I want you to maintain that volume. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir," Michael whispered. The backing track started, simple drums, bass, and guitar, creating the foundation that the vocals would build upon. Michael's brothers came in with their harmonies, tight and professional after hundreds of hours of rehearsal. Then Michael's cue arrived. He opened his mouth to sing, and nothing came out. His throat had completely closed up. The anxiety had overwhelmed him. Standing in a professional recording studio with everything riding on his performance, 8-year-old Michael Jackson couldn't make a sound. Don stopped the recording immediately. "It's okay, Michael. That happens to everyone. Let's take a breath and try again." In the control room, Gordon and Joe exchanged worried glances. This was exactly what they had feared. Catherine, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up with quiet determination. "Can I talk to him for a minute?" Don nodded. "Take all the time you need." Catherine walked into the recording booth and knelt down beside her youngest son. His eyes were filled with tears that he was desperately trying to hold back. "I can't do it, Mama," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm too scared." "What are you scared of, baby?" Catherine asked softly. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess up and we lose everything? Daddy will be so mad. Everyone will be disappointed." Catherine took Michael's face in her gentle hands and looked directly into his eyes. "Listen to me carefully. Do you know why your daddy brought you here? Why Gordon is giving our family this incredible chance?" Michael shook his head. "Because you're special, Michael. Not because you're perfect, but because you have something that most people don't have. You have a gift from God. And when you sing, you make people feel things they've never felt before." "But what if I mess up in the studio? What if it's different from singing at home?" Michael's voice was still shaking with fear. "Then you mess up and we try again," Catherine said firmly. "Baby, do you think I would let your daddy bring you here if I didn't believe with all my heart that you could do this?" "No, Mama. That's right. Now I want you to forget about the microphone. Forget about the engineer. Forget about everything except the song. Close your eyes if you need to. Just sing it like you sing it for me at home. Like it's just you and me in the kitchen and you're singing while I make dinner. Can you do that for me?" Michael nodded, wiping his eyes. Catherine kissed his forehead and walked back to the control room, her heart pounding with hope and terror. Don started the tape machine again. The backing track rolled, building the musical foundation. The brothers' harmonies came in perfectly, just as they had practiced. Then came Michael's cue. This time, Michael closed his eyes exactly as his mother had suggested, and he began to sing. The sound that emerged was completely transformed from his tentative sound check. This was confident, powerful, emotionally rich. Michael's voice filled the studio with a clarity and control that made Don sit up straighter at the mixing board, his eyes widening in disbelief. The first verse was technically perfect. Every note hit exactly where it needed to be. The timing was flawless. The emotional delivery was sophisticated beyond his years. The chorus arrived and Michael's voice soared with a power that seemed impossible from such a small body. His brother's harmonies locked in behind him, creating a wall of sound that was both tight and professional. During the second verse, Michael entered what performers call the zone. His eyes remained closed, but his body moved naturally with the rhythm. He wasn't just singing the words anymore. He was living them, feeling every emotion and transmitting it through his voice with an instinct that couldn't be taught. The bridge section required Michael to reach a higher register, the part Don had been most worried about. This was where most young singers struggled, where their voices cracked or strained. Michael nailed it perfectly. The note was pure, sustained, and absolutely flawless. The final chorus built with incredible energy. Michael gave everything he had, his voice climbing and soaring, building intensity until the very last note. When it ended, the studio fell completely silent. Don pressed the stop button on the tape machine, his hands slightly shaking. "That's a good scratch vocal," he said automatically, falling back on standard procedure. "We'll use that to identify any problems and then record it again for the master." But Gordon held up his hand urgently. "Wait, play that back." "It's just the first take," Don protested. "We should—" "Play it back, Don." Don sighed and rewound the tape, expecting to hear what he always heard on first attempts. Good foundation work, but plenty of technical issues to fix in subsequent recordings. The playback began, and Don Davis's expression slowly transformed into something approaching awe. What came through those studio monitors was impossible. The tone was perfect throughout. The pitch was dead on from beginning to end. The emotional delivery was exactly right, building where it needed to build, pulling back where it needed subtlety. There were no mistakes, no flat notes, no timing issues, no moments where Michael's voice got tired or lost focus. It was, in every technical and artistic sense, a perfect vocal performance from an 8-year-old child on his first professional recording attempt. Don had been engineering sessions for 15 years. He'd worked with seasoned professionals who needed 20 takes to achieve a vocal this clean, and Michael Jackson had delivered it on his first try. Don slowly removed his headphones and turned to look at Gordon, his face pale with shock. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "But we just heard it," Gordon replied. "No, you don't understand," Don said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Adults can't do what he just did. Professional singers with years of studio experience can't walk in cold and nail a lead vocal on the first take. These microphones pick up everything. Every tiny mistake, every moment of uncertainty, and there are none. None whatsoever." Don turned to look through the studio glass at Michael, who was standing at the microphone looking worried. "Did I mess up?" Michael asked through the talkback system. Don pressed the response button, his voice emotional. "Mess up? Son, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've recorded gospel legends and blues masters. I have never ever heard anyone nail a lead vocal on the first take like that." Michael's eyes widened with surprise and relief. "So it was okay?" "Okay," Don laughed, shaking his head. "Michael, what you just accomplished is what professional artists spend their entire careers trying to achieve. Most singers need 10 takes minimum. You did it once, and it was perfect." In the recording booth, Michael's brothers were staring at him with a mixture of pride and amazement. "Can I hear it?" Michael asked shyly. Don played the recording through the studio monitors so everyone could listen together. As the track played, Michael's expression changed from anxiety to wonder. That was his voice, and it sounded incredible. When the playback finished, Gordon stood up and walked into the recording booth. "Michael, how old are you?" "8, sir." Gordon shook his head in amazement. 8 years old. Joe, do you understand what you have here? This isn't just a talented kid. This is someone who records like he's been doing it professionally for 20 years. Joe's expression was complex, pride mixed with vindication and something approaching awe. So we're keeping that take? Keeping it? Gordon laughed. That's going to be the master recording. We're not touching it. You can't improve on perfection. They continued recording the rest of the song, the brothers' harmonies and additional background vocals, but Michael's lead vocal remained exactly as it was from that miraculous first take. When the session ended, Don pulled Gordon aside for a private conversation. We just recorded something historic, Don said seriously. That kid is going to be famous. Not just local famous, internationally famous. You really think so? I know so, because I've worked with hundreds of artists and I've never encountered anyone with that level of natural ability. Most great singers have to learn studio technique, microphone control, how to sustain energy across multiple takes. Michael just walked in and knew how to do all of it instinctively. Gordon looked at Michael, who was laughing and playing with his brothers. Just a normal 8-year-old boy. Big Boy was released in January 1968 and became a regional hit throughout the Midwest. By summer, Motown Records had heard about the Jackson 5, and Berry Gordy himself was making calls to Gary, Indiana. Years later, in a revealing 1995 interview, Michael was asked about that first professional recording session. I was absolutely terrified, or he admitted. I thought I was going to mess up and ruin everything for my family. My brothers, my father, everyone had invested everything in us making it. But you nailed it on the first take, the interviewer pointed out. Michael smiled with the wisdom of experience. I didn't know that was unusual. I thought everyone recorded that way. It wasn't until years later that engineers would tell me stories about other artists needing 20 or 30 takes. I never needed that many because I'd hear the song in my head exactly how it should sound, and then I'd just do it. Did that approach ever change as you became more famous? No. If anything, I became more particular about first takes because they have something that later attempts don't: spontaneity and pure emotion. You can hear someone thinking on the 20th take. On the first take, you hear someone feeling. That's what I tried to capture throughout my entire career. Don Davis retired from engineering in 1992, but he kept one precious memento from his decades-long career: the original master tape of Big Boy, Michael Jackson's first professional recording. People ask me about all the famous artists I've worked with, Don would say, and I've been blessed to work with some real legends. But that tape is my most prized possession because it's proof that I was there the day an 8-year-old boy did something that seasoned professionals couldn't do. Did you know he'd become the biggest star in the world? After hearing that first take, Don would smile. Yeah, I knew. Anyone with ears knew. Michael Jackson didn't become great through years of practice and development. He walked into that studio already great. The world just needed time to catch up. March 23, 1968, lasted only 3 hours. But in those 3 hours, 8-year-old Michael Jackson proved something that would define his entire extraordinary career. That true talent isn't just about practice and training. It's about instinct, about knowing what's right before anyone tells you, about having a gift so natural that you can't separate it from breathing. Michael walked into that studio terrified he would fail his family. He left having created something perfect on his first attempt, setting a standard of excellence that would follow him for the rest of his life. Because once you've proven you can do the impossible, the world expects you to keep doing it forever. Today, more than 5 decades after that remarkable March morning in Gary, Indiana, the story of Michael Jackson's first recording session continues to inspire musicians, engineers, and dreamers around the world. Music historians and industry professionals still marvel at the impossibility of what happened in those 3 hours at Steeltown Records. Young artists studying vocal technique are often told the legend of the 8-year-old who walked into a studio and achieved perfection on his first attempt, though many find it hard to believe that such natural talent could exist. The master tape of Big Boy that Don Davis treasured until his death remains one of the most significant artifacts in popular music history. It serves as undeniable proof that greatness isn't always developed through years of training and struggle, Sometimes it simply exists, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself to the world. That recording session established a pattern that would define Michael's entire career. His ability to capture magic in the moment, to trust his instincts completely, and to deliver performances that transcended technical perfection to touch something deeper in the human spirit. What makes Michael's achievement even more extraordinary is the context in which it occurred. This wasn't a child prodigy performing in a controlled environment with unlimited takes and modern technology. This was a terrified 8-year-old boy, standing in a modest studio in industrial Gary, with everything his family had sacrificed riding on 3 hours of recording time. The pressure should have crushed him, the unfamiliar environment should have intimidated him, and his complete lack of studio experience should have resulted in multiple failed attempts. Instead, Michael Jackson proved that some gifts are so pure, so instinctive, that they can't be diminished by fear, inexperience, or pressure. His first recording session wasn't just the beginning of the greatest career in popular music. It was a testament to the power of natural talent when it's nurtured by love, supported by family, and given the chance to shine. The 8-year-old boy who walked into Steeltown Records that day carrying the weight of his family's dreams walked out having proven that miracles don't just happen in fairy tales. Sometimes they happen in small recording studios in Indiana, when an extraordinary child opens his mouth and changes the world with the power of his voice, one perfect note at a time.